Welcome back, Warrior. We are reading Doctrine and Covenants, section 134 today. And let's read the little preface here, or this, I don't know what it's called. A declaration of belief regarding governments and laws in general, adopting by unanimous vote at a General Assembly of the Church held at Kirtland, Ohio, August 17th, 1835. Many saints gathered together to consider the proposed contents of the first edition of the Doctrine and Covenants. At that time, this declaration was given the following preamble: that our belief with regard to earthly governments and laws in general may not be misinterpreted nor misunderstood. We have thought proper to present at the close of this volume our opinion concerning the same. Okay. Really quick. It is 12 verses. They are a little bit long, but it's fine. Also, I have when you take a vitamin and it hasn't gone all the way down. Well, I took my vitamins yesterday, last night, and I still feel like it's stuck in there. So I'm like, ugh. Does that happen to you? Feels right there. Okay, here we go. Doctrine and Covenants. Here's the historical background. Doctrine and Covenants, 134, is a little different from most other sections in the Doctrine and Covenants. For one thing, it's not a revelation. It's actually a statement of beliefs about government and laws written and adopted by church leaders on August 17th, 1835, during a General Assembly in Kirtland, Ohio. Joseph Smith wasn't at that meeting. He was away on church business, so Oliver Cowdery presided. At the time, church members, especially in Missouri, were dealing with serious persecution. They had been driven from their homes, and local and even federal leaders weren't stepping in to help. This declaration was written in that context, reflecting the frustrations about governments, about how governments should protect people and uphold freedom. Even though this section appears later in the Doctrine and Covenants, it actually belongs earlier chronologically, around the same time as section 107 and 108. Section 133 had originally been intended as something of a concluding section to the earlier collection of revelations. So section 134 was added afterward as more of an appendix. The heading of Doctrine and Covenants 134 makes it clear that this is a belief statement, not a revelation. That is important to keep in mind as you study it. That said, the principles it teaches, like the importance of freedom of religion, justice, and accountability in government, are still seen as relevant today. Church leaders have often referred back to these ideas when talking about civic duty and religious liberty. Okay, here we go. Section 134:1. We believe that governments were instituted of God for the benefit of man, and that He holds men accountable for their acts in relation to them, both in making laws and administering them for the good and safety of society. Okay, and then as you study this section, so that was verse 1, but now I'm reading commentary. As you study this section, you will find principles regarding responsibilities of citizens and that of government. You may want to consider why the early saints identified these and why they are still important today. Okay. There's a quote. Abraham Lincoln once observed this, quote, "Bad laws, if they exist, should be repealed as soon as possible. Still, while they continue in force, they should be religiously observed. This is the attitude of the church in regard to law observance. There is no reason or justification for men to disregard or break the law or try to take it into their own hands. It is the duty of citizens of any country to remember that they have individual responsibilities and that they must operate within the law of the country in which they have chosen to live." End quote. President N. Eldon Tanner, The Laws of God, October 1975 General Conference. Okay, so yeah, because there's times when the laws of the land and the laws of God are not in full accord. So that's why this this is what President Tanner said and Abraham Lincoln said, right? So and it's hard because some of us might think, oh, we can't choose to live anywhere, right? I feel like part of that quote is like, oh, well, that's nice if you've chosen to live in a specific country. And that country has good laws. There are other countries that you can live in if you choose to do so. And it might be hard and it might be doing the most to try and move. But yeah, I feel like where you live is definitely in your control, regardless of if you think it's in your control or not, right? Like, I don't know how to put that in non-mean way, because I know that some people might think that that's not being considerate to those who are like trapped in certain situations. I mean, unless you're some kind of a war prisoner or something, or you experiencing war, then yeah, I definitely think that there's nothing that you can do. But then again, you can choose to have a different attitude about where you live. If you've read the book by Viktor Frankl, I can't remember now what it's called, but anyways, he's so good. He's such an awesome example of a healthy man, and B, his mind was like amazing regardless of his situation. So definitely the epitome of the quote from President Nelson that he said our circumstances are not, it's something like, oh great, let me find it, hold on. Okay, so President Nelson says, the joy we feel has little to do with the circumstances of our lives and everything to do with the focus of our lives, right? Okay, so it's called Man's Search for Meaning, the book by Viktor Frankl, and his experiences in a concentration camp, which you wish you could escape for sure because of the horrendous stuff going on there. But Viktor Frankl said that, no, not quoting, but like, it's like life holds meaning regardless of one's circumstances to his own situation. And he writes about consciously commanding his mind to detach from his immediate physical circumstances in order to apply the central tenet of logotherapy. Okay, so now we're on verse 2. We believe that no government can exist in peace except such laws are framed and held inviolate as we secure to each individual the free exercise of conscience, the right and control of property, and the protection of life. Okay, and then President Ezra Taft Benson emphasized that life, liberty, and property are mankind's three great rights. Interesting. And there's a talk called Mankind's Three Great Rights, and you can find it on the church's website. Okay, then there's verse 3. We believe that all governments necessarily require civil officers and magistrates to enforce the laws of the same, and that such as will administer the law in equity and justice should be sought for and upheld by the voice of the people, if a republic, or the will of the sovereign. Verse 4, we believe that religion is instituted of God, and that men are amenable to him and to him only for the exercise of it, unless their religious opinions prompt them to infringe upon the rights and liberties of others. But we do not believe that human law has a right to interfere in prescribing rules of worship to bind the conscience of men, nor dictate forms for public or private devotion, that the civil magistrate should restrain crime, but never control conscience, should punish guilt, but never suppress the freedom of the soul. That's good. There's a quote from Joseph Smith saying, but meddle not with any man for his religion, and all governments ought to permit every man to enjoy his religion unmolested. No man is authorized to take away life in consequence of difference of religion, which all laws and governments ought to tolerate and protect, right or wrong, end quote. Ooh, I agree. Joseph Smith, Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith. Okay, and then verse 5. We believe that all men are bound to sustain and uphold the respective governments in which they reside. While protected in their inherent and inalienable rights by the laws of such governments, and that sedition and rebellion are unbecoming every citizen thus protected and should be punished accordingly, and that all governments have a right to enact such laws as in their own judgments are best calculated to secure the public interest, at the same time, however, holding sacred the freedom of conscience. We believe that every man should be honored in his station, rulers and magistrates as such being placed for the protection of the innocent and the punishment of the guilty, and that to the laws all men owe respect and deference, as without them peace and harmony would be supplanted by anarchy and terror, human laws being instituted for the express purpose of regulating our interests as individuals and nations between man, and divide laws given of heaven, prescribing rules and spiritual concerns for faith and worship, both to be answered by man to his maker. We believe, verse 7, we believe that rulers, states, and governments have a right and are bound to enact laws for the protection of all citizens in the free exercise of their religious belief, but we do not believe that they have a right in justice to deprive citizens of this privilege or prescribe them in their opinions, so long as a regard and reverence are shown to the laws, and such religious opinions do not justify sedition nor conspiracy. These are like really good. Okay, Wilford Woodruff taught, God will bless no king, no emperor, and no president who will not give unto his subjects the rights and privileges in their relationship to God, which the Father himself has given unto them. Whenever these subjects are deprived of their rights, those who preside over them are held responsible. End quote. President Wilford Woodruff, Deseret Weekly News, April 19th, 1890. Okay, verse 8. We believe that the commission of crime should be punished according to the nature of the offense, that murder, treason, robbery, theft, and the breach of the general peace in all respects should be punished according to their criminality and their tendency to evil among men by the laws of the government in which the offense is committed. And for the public peace and tranquility, all men should step forward and use their ability in bringing offenders against good laws to punishment. We do not believe it just to mingle religious influence with civil government, whereby one religious society is fostered and another prescribed in its spiritual privileges, and the individual rights of its members as citizens denied. Verse 10, we believe that all religious societies have a right to deal with their members for disorderly conduct according to the rules and regulations of such societies, provided that such dealings be for fellowship and good standing. But we do not believe that any religious society has authority to try men on the right of property or life, or to take them this world's goods, or to put them in jeopardy of either life or limb, or to inflict any physical punishment upon them. They can only excommunicate them from their society and withdraw them from their fellowship. Okay. President James E. Faust said this. He says, a few may lack understanding of the real commitment of the faithful. For instance, a critic recently wrote that obedience to the commandments, such as tithing, is mandatory. In order to claim certain blessings, obedience is certainly obligatory, but compliance is never mandatory, that is, forced. Nothing is mandatory in this church. Free agency is a cardinal principle of obedience. Obedience comes from love of God and a commitment to his work. The only punishment for serious transgression or apostasy is the removal of members from the society and fellowship of the church. President James E. Faust, The Abundant Life, October 1985, General Conference. Love that. Okay, verse 11. We believe that men should appeal to the civil law for redress of all wrongs and grievances where personal abuse is inflicted or the right of property or character infringed, where such laws exist as will protect the same, but we believe that all men are justified in defending themselves, their friends, and property, and the government from the unlawful assaults and encroachments of all persons in times of exigency, where immediate appeal cannot be made to the laws and the relief afforded. I have no idea what that said. And then verse 12, we believe it just to preach the gospel to the nations. We believe it just to preach the gospel to the nations of the earth and warn the righteous to save themselves from the corruption of the world. But we do not believe it right to interfere with bond servants, neither preach the gospel to, nor baptize them contrary to the will and wish of their masters, nor to meddle with or influence them in the least to cause them to be dissatisfied with their situations in this life, thereby jeopardizing the lives of men. Such interference we believe to be unlawful and unjust and dangerous to the peace of every government, allowing human beings to be held in servitude. Oh, okay. So during the early days of the church, especially during the times the saints lived in Missouri, they were often accused of being on the side of freeing the slaves and overthrowing slavery. Not only did Joseph Smith teach against slavery, but most of the saints were coming from the north and had strong anti-slavery sentiments. This, in fact, was one of the major reasons there was such animosity towards the saints from the Missourians. In response to these sentiments and accusations, verse 12 was written. The Doctrine and Covenants student manual teaches this. Although the church teaches that slavery is wrong and counter to the fundamental rights of an individual, the prophet Joseph Smith taught that when slavery is tolerated by a government, it is not the church's position to try to overthrow that established order. It should be the duty of an elder when he enters into a house to salute the master of the house, and if he gain his consent, then he may preach to all that are in that house. But if he gain not his consent, let him not go unto his slaves or servants, but let the responsibility be upon the head of the master of that house and the consequences thereof. And the guilt of that house is no longer upon his skirts. But if the master of that house give consent, the elder may preach to his family, his wife, his children, and his servants, his manservants, or his maidservants, or his slaves. End quote. History of the Church, Volume 2, page 263. Okay, so that's Doctrine and Covenants Student Manual, section 134. Okay, so that is the end of section 134. Let's do the read it, live it, and then we'll be done, and we can go to the baptism. Okay, here it is. All right. It says governments are instituted by God to provide for peace and the good of society. They have a responsibility to preserve the freedom for people to worship and live according to conscience. Give thanks for this gift. Ooh, that's so true, especially here in the United States. I feel like we probably enjoy freedom of religion a lot more than our brothers and sisters around the world. So, I mean, I haven't really tried going to church in a ton of other countries, but we have gone to several countries, and those countries in which we did go, I'm grateful for that, because that is really cool. All right, that is it for today. So until Doctrine and Covenants, section 135, stay strong, warrior.